Let's
late
start with the
90s.
99 finals.
I want to start before that, Dom Jumper.
Okay. Let's go. What
Before
you
that.
thinking?
The 96 offseason was a major offseason for us because we
Okay.
traded away Anthony Mason to the Hornets. We got back Larry Johnson, who had a bad back. They
Mhm.
signed Allen Houston, and that wasn't even the $100 million contract yet. I think that was in 97 or 98 when they signed Allen Houston to $100 million deal. That offseason was Pat Riley had gone to Miami. So he
Okay.
got Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning. They got rid of I think Rashawn Leonard, and they got rid of uh I think Glenn Rice. No, not Glenn Rice. Forgot who it was that Miami got rid
You
of.
sure it wasn't Glenn Rice? Because Glenn Rice was on the 98 Hornets.
And they got rid of no, so they maybe. But that was a major deal. That was the first time when the GM he had asked the Knicks owner at the time was Dolan's father for a piece of the Knicks. And they said no for him to stay. And I was like, you're supposed to give Pat Riley anything he wants. Like he created this team
Mhm.
with Patrick Ewing. He coached us in the 90s. Then he goes on to Miami and immediately makes them a contender. Like he basically he brought in Tim Hardaway on Alonzo Mourning to the Miami Heat because the Hornets were obviously dumping everyone if they got rid of LJ and Alonzo Mourning and got back Glenn Rice. And so that kind of like pissed us off because how the hell did Miami become relevant? Who 2 years, 3 years later, the Allen Houston game, he's the game winner against them. We kind of like, we got revenge on in a sense, but he still made them relevant. But those teams were kind of like even that 99 run. We had LJ, we had Marcus Camby. LJ hit the famous 4-pointer, and then we got Sprewell that offseason and that was another thing. Oh my God. There was a rumor. I'm in 6th grade. There was a rumor that we could have traded John Starks in 93 for Latrell Sprewell. I couldn't believe it. I'm 10, 11 years old, knowing that that's a better trade. I don't know how I know this innately, but I do. So 6 years later, when the trade happens, I'm like, damn, this is 6 years late. What if Patrick Ewing would have had Latrell Sprewell in his prime? Don't worry about it. You could do that. You could do yoga and everything. We're just in tune.
No, just my back was hurting. But I mean, here's the thing. I hate to sound like I don't know, but I haven't gotten there yet. Like I don't know how good Latrell Sprewell was with the Warriors in the early 90s. Um, you know more about that than me. I'm still a rookie when it comes to the 90s. I know more than my peers, but that's not saying much. They don't do their research.
No, but you will, and that's the other amazing thing that people will pick up on. They'll learn with Dime
Yeah.
Dropper. He's 22 years old.
Just turned 23 a couple months ago.
Nobody is going back to the 1960s to look at every game and be able to argue the way that you will, and you're going to document everything. So
Yeah.
Latrell Sprewell in the 90s was basically a one-handed bandit. It's the guy you saw in 99. But imagine him being younger and growing with in New York.
Yeah.
So when he came to the Knicks, we did not expect to get to that finals run.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course. I mean, as
um,
the 8th seed, that never happened before.
right, and that was the first time, or was that when Denver beat Seattle? That
They
was
never
the
they didn't
first.
go to the finals though. Oh no,
Right,
you're talking about the first time. Yeah, the first time an 8 seed beat a 1 seed was Seattle, Denver in
right.
'94.
94. Wow, it's crazy. That was the year after Barkley went to they beat in the Western Conference Finals against
Yeah,
Barkley.
against Chuck. He always talks about that game 7 that was the best game of his life.
I remember watching that game. We'll get to that in a second or later on.
Yeah.
But that was the build-up to the 99 season, and we didn't have a chance to beat the Spurs. I knew we didn't have a chance, but Sprewell and Allen Houston, especially Sprewell, gave us a jolt. And going into the 2000s, Sprewell, he unraveled. And everything that we saw with PJ Carlissimo, we heard about it, it came to be true. Then they traded Patrick Ewing to the Orlando Magic for why am I forgetting this trade right now? Because it was for Glenn Rice. Oh no, it was to the and then it was a 3-way trade. We gotta look that up because I did not look this up. How dare I?
What were the tell my subscribers, what were the Knicks like before Dolan as a fan?
In the
A lot of these
90s?
kids, they don't even know. I mean, my era has been Dolan.
In the 90s?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, whenever before when Dolan took over.
His father was I think it was Dave Checketts. They were great, bro. Like they had the city on smash. It
Winning
was
organization.
yes. If anyone gets to watch the 1986 Mets documentary, It's a 30 for 30. That's what the Knicks felt like. Like they there were so many 90s teams back then, even the Bulls, the Pacers, that copied the 80s blueprint of the Pistons. Big men that were just bullying you. The Knicks copied it and they took the Bulls to 7 games in 92, 93. Ewing, Oakley, Anthony Mason, John Starks, these became household names in New York City. They were rough. Everyone knew it. They didn't care. It felt like what New York City felt like going outside. Like during the pandemic, I was a little worried because my daughter is a teenager now, and I have to prepare her for what started to feel like a 90s New York City environment. It started to feel a little bit crazy, and the Knicks had that blue collar mentality. Pat Riley, again, bringing him back up, the smooth Wall Street looking finagler out there on the sideline, running the sidelines. He just came from winning 4 titles with the Lakers. So
Yeah.
we had everything built in with them. It felt like a movie. You had the big center, most talented dude. My mother remembers when we drafted. We got the number 1 pick for Patrick Ewing. She said she was sitting in Shea Stadium during those 86 Met run.
Wow.
She
Which
was sitting.
for 30 is that? Doc and Daryl?
No, it's another one. It's the 86 Mets. It's after this book. I forgot the name of this author,
Hmm.
but he wrote the book and they did the document, the 30 for 30 on it, based on it. And it's really good. They talk about Dykstra. They talk about the entire team, how Gary Carter was like the fake leader. He would just talk too much, but Keith Hernandez was really the backbone to that team. And Keith Hernandez was my mother loves Keith Hernandez. I thought he only played for the Mets as a kid, and she's the one who told me no, he used to play for St. Louis, and St. Louis used to kill us.
Hmm.
He was a big Red Machine fan. So anyway, the New York City was a Mets town in the 80s because of that, because they represented the wildness of the 80s, the cracked out era of New York City. Come to the 90s, the Knicks represented the blue collar Knicks, the blue collar New York City. So that was what made it exciting. It was an event to watch. I mean, you seen it the other night with the Knicks versus the Celtics. That was one game. The Knicks felt like that every other day in New York. Every time you went to school, we couldn't argue. Like we were in arguments with just like what you see on Twitter right now. That was the Knicks. We had a team to fight for and root for in the 90s.
Who are you arguing against? Jordan fanboys?
You had Jordan fanboys for the most part because you didn't have anyone that was a Pacers fan
Yeah.
in school. You really didn't. Whoever was a Reggie Miller fan probably got jumped. New York
Yeah.
City once again was wild. You were respected if you were like Jordan was so great. He was a villain that people loved him. We wore his sneakers, so he was a cultural icon besides being a basketball icon. So you were allowed to root for him. Like you were like probably you were just probably just you were cool with it, and people were cool with you liking Jordan because it became the argument. Like we killed you. It was always part of the whole.
That's
You know,
crazy
the
because I know
bus ride to school.
my uncle was around your age, hated it. He said it was annoying. Everybody's jumping on the Bulls bandwagon when he's a Laker fan and Magic's gone, and they're like, "Yeah, it's old news now. Showtime's done."
That's what happened in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
See, but
Jordan.
we had to play this guy 4 times a year.
Which makes it to me, I feel like I'd be more annoyed if I was a Knicks fan.
Hmm. It wasn't. It's just like you know what it is. Like that's the thing about Twitter that kind of like when we're on Twitter and Twitter Spaces for the most part, you're not in person. Like you get to argue with somebody and laugh at them and then crack jokes. Like you don't understand what we went through when Patrick Ewing scored 1 point against the Indiana Pacers, 1 free throw point. The embarrassment you have to go through when you go to school. When Jordan came back, my boy Joe, shout out to my man Joe Rose. When Jordan came back with the Magic, and he got stripped by Nick Anderson. He always talks about the embarrassment of walking down the halls in school and people yelling at him because Michael Jordan came back and did that. Then the next year he was able to talk shit back because Jordan came back. It wasn't just on Twitter, you know what I mean? Like back then it was bragging rights. You had bragging rights, and it felt like people were on the bandwagon, and you knew exactly where they were. That's why all the stuff that's going on right now with Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, all those bandwagon dudes. I'm kind of like used to it now because I'm like, oh, these are the Jordan fans from back then. You guys will not be Warriors fans in 5 or 7 years when they suck. That's what
Yeah,
happened to the Bulls.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's the part that annoys me because these guys, like when they leave, what are they gonna do? Pick a new fan, like pick a new guy. Like for me, you too. We just ride for our teams every single decade, every single year, and we live with the changes. You know, the players come and go, but we stay. And like I always rep my squad. The thing with my arguments at school was it was always LeBron versus Kobe from my childhood, and then Lakers. The Laker fans would clown me though because it's Clippers and Lakers. Like Laker fans, they don't really get clowned because there's too many of them. Like you know what I mean? But that was just my experience. But yeah, I do miss that like kind of Twitter-ish kind of thing, but in person at school. And you know what though? What was cool about school is we would just talk like real basketball. Like we would talk on what we saw last night. The arguments now are like, oh, he's averaging more, his PER is better. Like that's not how we talked back in the day.
No.
He's gravity. Look at some of these terms. We always talk about it. Some of the terms that I've been seeing, man, it sounds so like nerdy, like gravity, floor raiser.
That gravity, floor raiser, his ceiling. Now, somebody's ceiling was
His
always there.
leverage. He's leveraging his pick and rolls.
Is that leveraging a I don't even know.
I don't know what that really means.
He's how okay. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Like, I can't, but we wouldn't be using that because again, it was like barbershop talk
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
hallways, like in between classes, in the lunchroom, at gym, in between like whatever. If you're trying to holler at girls, like it was in between all of these things. It was part of our culture, especially in New York. And jerseys just started being in style. Like you could wear a jersey to school as like a shirt. That's part of your attire. So it was different. I mean, it was still part of the like I said, the culture. And with Twitter, it is also that's why Twitter Spaces made it changed everything because it feels more like that. Like it feels like high school again. I'll be 40 this year. So to feel like I'm in high school again is weird. But when I say it out loud, but in the middle of it, it's like it's cool because it's to argue with people about ball, and it's like you challenge yourself too, and you get to see if you really know what you know.